And that moves us to number 14 on our agenda. No, it moves us to number 15 on our agenda, which is the discussion of Board Policy KF, Community Use of School Facilities, Exhibit G, and discussion of Administrative Rule KF-R, Community Use of School Facilities in Exhibit H. And this has been put on our agenda because we have had a lot of requests to board members this year regarding our use of, our community use of school facilities policy, in particular the fee schedule. And there's been a lot of questions from board members, so this was the way for the board to be able to have this conversation. Dr. Ross, I don't know if you want to, if you have anything to contribute, if you have anything to say about this before we start kind of throwing out questions that we've had from the community, or?
Yeah. So our position is we're here to answer, really take information back. I know we have been working with our attorney on this policy and its implications, so we just wanted to hear the discussion of the board, have an opportunity to take that back, do research, and bring back proposals.
Okay. Well, if the board doesn't mind, I'll kind of kick it off, and then we can kind of have conversation. All right, so we've had several different community organizations, nonprofits, and other community organizations that have been frustrated this year about the policy relating to the administrative rule that has a fee schedule. And I think some of this is, the frustration is because, and the question that I have as a board member is how this fee schedule was set. I know that it's an administrative rule, but feedback that I've heard, and it's not just one organization. I know we had an organization speak here tonight, but it's not just that organization, is that we've had several groups that work directly with District 5 students that provide after-school support, whether, I mean, it's athletics. I mean, typically it's related to athletics, I think, that I have heard. I'm not sure if other folks have heard other organizations, whether it's at one school or several schools. And our fee schedule this year, for some reason, has become, it's like cost prohibitive, where it will stop after school activities that are very important to students. And I'm trying to figure out where we're setting a rate and why that is happening. And especially with organizations that are willing to provide maintenance and upgrades to facilities to maintain them, and that are proven organizations, they're not trying to get rich. It's not like it's not like a for-profit entity. It's not like a travel all-star athletic entity. And so those are questions that I've gotten, and I'm concerned as a board member where this is coming from. So I think that, when we're, and I want to make sure that I don't want to call out any organizations, but I know that we do have organizations that have memorandums of understanding with our district that do provide maintenance to provide maintenance to athletic fields or spaces, that the district doesn't have to do that because that there is an agreement in place. And I think that we need to be considering that with long-standing relationships with organizations. I mean, there needs to be some kind of like common sense conversation where we're not phasing out really important programs. So I'm going to throw this to another board member. If anybody has any thought, I'm calling everybody the wrong names.
That's all right. You were looking at me. Yeah, I guess I would just ask that the commonality that I'm hearing is outdoors, organizations that manage their own activities. They don't need somebody there watching. They're for our students. And it just, and I understand, like you said, there's limitations because of prior agreements, but it bothers me that we have a $0 lease agreement with an organization that doesn't support our kids, and we want to charge these organizations what seems like a small amount, but to them, when you're a nonprofit and you're really just trying to cover your costs, it ends up being a lot of money. So I guess I would just ask that we go back and we look at the fee schedule and we look at the rules and we see if we can't come up with a way to make it as low cost as possible, particularly for organizations that are not entering the buildings.
I almost think that we need to have a waiver for specific, I mean, maybe there needs to be a criteria set to make sure that, because on the flip side of this, one of the concerns that I've heard is, there's going to be some organizations that are going to tell you that they don't want to pay a fee, but they're actually making a lot of money, like for a profit. But those aren't the organizations that have come to us. The organizations that have come to us are organizations that have been in our district for a long time and are waiving fees for students that can't afford to pay for them. And so they're actually losing money at certain schools because they're being charged, a fee. And for folks that don't know what the fee schedule is, I mean, I'm looking at the fee schedule for baseball and softball facilities. It's $500 for the first hour. And there's a minimum, apparently, of 2 hours, from what I've heard. For just practice field facilities, I think it's $100. I mean, but $500 for the first hour. Now, a football stadium, that's a whole different ballgame. But a field at an elementary school that's not being used, or having students run around the school campus when there are actual employees that are monitoring that program, I don't understand. I don't understand that. So I'm going to go to Mr. Satterfield and then Mr. Scully.
Mr. Wiseman, we still have the school park agreement, right?
Yes.
So anything that has to do with the park school agreement, they can use our facilities and we share facilities, correct? There are no charges.
Correct.
Okay. Now, I know that the one public participant they were talking about, they live in an area that's Friarsgate Park, and that's not part of ICRC.
No, sir, it's part of Richland County.
And we do not have an agreement with...
I could not find one, but I've been in conversation with the director there, and we have kind of getting back to we have been in discussion on how we're going to address these issues.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I know that, like Ms. Hines has referred to, if you go to a lot of these schools, especially elementary schools, Chapin Elementary School, the fields are always lit up, and there's hordes of kids, and it's just a great place to be. I mean, I just like a Coke and a bag of peanuts and go and watch the kids, and there's a bunch of kids that it's such a great thing that they're out playing. I think back in my years, there was common sense sort of that was used. I mean, I was the sponsor of the SCA for many years. I was never charged anything, and that's not really a school organization. That's part of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and we never had an issue with. But it was just sort of common sense, so to speak. But maybe it'd be a good idea to sort of revisit this and look at some of these fees that we're charging. If the folks, I know that, again, I use Chapin Elementary as an example because that's where I first worked. Crooked Creek, actually it was Irma Chapin, they came in and built all those fields. There was nothing but one big field out there. They built all the baseball fields and they kept them up and they marked, and they were free for us to use all during the day, and we used them for physical education classes and field days and things like that. So it might be a good idea to look back, or just, if there's not somebody trying to make a huge profit off this, but it's for the good of the community, I just think it's worthy of discussing anyway.
I agree. I mean, I think, we honored Irma Little Leagues at our school kickoff with all of our entire district a couple of years ago when they went to the World Series. So we're like claiming them as ours, but we want to charge thousands of dollars for them to use a field that they've paid money to help rehab. Is that correct?
I know they're doing some work on it, or literally started doing some work on it. We wasn't aware that they were going to do that at the time. That's why we halted it. That's also why we've gone back and talked to Richland County. And I will tell you that the ones that you're aware of, there are probably a half a dozen other issues that I'm having to address, which is why I'm happy this is already on the agenda. We were already working on a proposal to address not only athletic programs or sports programs in the school districts that are non-profitable, but sometimes churches use our parking lots, other facilities, Ochre Strut.
But those are not student-facing organizations.
Right. And what I'm trying to do is get a policy that's fair and consistent across all of those areas so that maybe there's a seasonal fee. So it's not by hour, it's just a small usage fee so that, one, we know who's on our property. We just found out 2 weeks ago that there was a church using our property that wanted to do some improvements, which we're all for, but we didn't know they were on there, so we didn't have a release of liability. So those are the issues that we're just trying to capture. It's more about maintaining who's on our property, knowing who's on our property, and making sure we have the right insurance policies with if you will, a registration fee for the season.
Kevin, or Mr. Scully?
Yeah, I guess the first thing I want to figure out is what's the intent behind the fee and the fee schedule? Is it in terms of setting the fee and the amount and so forth? Is it to make it budget neutral? Is it so that we can earn a profit, whatever, for our purposes? I guess that's the first thing I would want to know. And then second, but because if it is a cost to us, then that's a question the board needs to consider is, are we willing to bear that cost and that expense? What's the district's responsibilities when these properties are being used? Are we required to provide security and other services while they're being used? What costs are associated to us for that? And are there any other, one thing when other groups are helping to enhance our properties, I guess, are there any legal issues or risks there? I mean, could they, if they invest money into our properties, could they turn around and make a claim on that same property in the future because they put money into it? So those are just some general questions that I would be interested in having the answers to.
I think our policy kind of addresses some of those in the sense of, our policy requires that anybody that uses our facility has a certificate of insurance, which I think the organizations that have approached us have had that. And I think that it actually, in both of them, I think it identifies that the fees are to cover any operational or incidental expenses for use of those facilities, which kind of goes back to what Ms. Huddle was saying when we talk about the use of outdoor facilities, especially for some of these situations, because it's not using like the cafeteria or something in school for like a church group, or I think there's something in here that political groups can use facilities. It identifies who can use the facility. So like for-profit entities, I think it says that it can't, things like that. So I think that that's addressed in the policy. It's just we haven't really talked about the policy. And the fee schedule is part of that administrative rule that the district is using. And that kind of is coming into play, like how to, if we're using a practice field, what is that operational cost? It's outside. If you're not, especially if you're not using lights or if it's during the day. I mean, I'm kind of spitballing questions off of what you're saying. Yeah. Mr. Hogan.
But
sorry.
we just need to be aware of the cost and make that decision of whether we're willing to contribute if there is an actual expense to the district for that, and it's not covered certainly, wholly by the fees.
You good, Kevin? All right. Mr. Wiseman, I guess my request, as you guys are evaluating the language inside these policies, where I guess my my issue within this fee schedule is that, you know, we put such a focus on the students while they're in our care, custody, and control. And we've got these 17,000 students from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m., plus or minus. And these organizations that are student-facing are the ones that are taking care of these kids from 4 o'clock till whenever, right? And from the perspective of how you guys are going to look at it, what I would encourage you to do is to figure out a caveat to where student-facing organizations have more of an advantageous way to utilize resources that we've got within our district that, I mean, they are taxpayer-funded properties, and just looking at as to how we can make sure that no child's left behind.
The intent is to do just that, sir.
Do we know how much money we make a year off of facility rental fees?
I do
Or
not
how
have-
many different entities rent space outside of the major park and rec one?
I don't have that information available.
So it's not like a big budget maker.
Oh, no.
Ms. Rawls, do you know that answer? Like, is it significant where,
I don't know, ma'am. I could certainly research that.
okay. I'm just curious because I would feel like it's not, we shouldn't be, I mean, I don't think we're trying to make a profit off of this. The policy doesn't read like that's what we would be doing if it's covering, you know, the operational expense during that time. Anybody else? Ms. Barnhart, sorry.
Just a couple comments. You know, the organization that we have been discussing currently here this evening that's being represented, my child played there for years, my husband coached there, so I might be a little biased. But my question is, for example, in that situation where we are talking about a field that is out of the way, not being used, the organization is willing to kind of cover the cost of maintaining, using it at the appropriate hours. I guess on the fee schedule, now it'd be one thing if, say, somebody was wanting to use the current sitting Chapin High School baseball stadium or the current Irmo High School football field or something like that. But I guess in this one instance, it does seem kind of outlandish to charge $500 an hour for this one simple thing. But yeah, I would like to maybe work on this policy with the fee schedule when it comes to stuff like that, because to your point, if it's not really being used, I mean, not being used that much and we're not really getting a lot of funding from it, it really would help our community, especially because a lot of these organizations are things that our students do after school and kind of tie hand in hand with just the loving and growing of our students from school time to after hours, so.
Right. Personally, I think this fee schedule is ridiculous, and it makes me angry because it's very expensive to put your kids in after-school activities, and when you have fee schedules like this, where you have especially the field that they want to use, they're not even trying to use and I'm talking about one specific situation now. They're not even trying to use that after it gets dark. So those are going to be for the young kids that are already playing super late. And as a parent, that's frustrating.
And I will say in that situation as well, I mean, they have put a lot, and I'm sure there are other places across our district, not just this one, but just because it's the one that we've been talking about tonight, that they have put a lot of time and energy, and I'm sure finances into really updating that area as it is at that park. And it would just be a good investment back in our community to help them out, because I think that parking lot's still used kind of as parking anyways, so in any other situations like this, it just might be beneficial.
Okay. Does anyone, Ms. Huddle?
I'm wondering, I was just looking at the dates on the policy, and I don't think it's been changed since 2019.
Not
But,
that I'm aware of.
I went and watched that board meeting to see what this was about, and it wasn't about the fee schedule. It was, they adopted the policy that was basically, they had a committee. There was a committee at that time that talked about the actual policy and changed the language of the policy kind of to conform with the School Board Association, but it wasn't they didn't discuss the fee schedule.
Okay. Well, and I
Because
guess
I
that's
was
kind of what
curious.
I was getting to, is even if they did, I guess I just wanted to probably take a little heat off of you,
Right.
because my impression is that you didn't create it, but you're trying to manage to what we have and do your job. And so you're not being the bad guy, you're just following the rules, and that what we need to do as a board is look at the rules.
And whether or not, and I agree, and I also wonder if this has been like uniformly applied over the years, because
Yeah.
what I'm hearing is that some of these organizations have had agreements or have not had to pay fees, and now in the last year, it's come to their attention that they do. So if we just need to get rid of the fees, we can.
I will tell you this, because I don't know, I have been looking at this specifically for a number of different cases. I will tell you that the policy doesn't give me the latitude to say it's one cost for the whole season. It's basically per use. So if you're using that baseball field several times in a season, that's where the cost comes back. I would like to come back with a proposal that for the smaller organizations that are really related to some of the smaller kids, there's not a lot of wear and tear on the facilities, that we come back with a seasonal rate. That's more manageable for the organizations. I'm specifically concerned about making sure I know who's on our property, that they're properly insured, and that if there is a cost afterwards, something happens somewhere, we have a way to go back and recapture our funding. It's not a profit-making entity, but it is a requirement I think that I have to make sure that we have accountability for handshakes that were done 10 years ago. In the last couple of years, we've changed a number of different folks. A lot of people don't recall. We've changed principles and other things. Don't recall some of those written or unwritten policies or agreements. So my intent is to go back and formalize everything so that 5 years from now, we're looking at the same group of information so that you can make different decisions as you see fit.
And I understand that. I think that definitely one of the good things about the policy is that it does require anybody that uses our facilities to have an insurance rider and have those kinds of the kind of information that you need. What the policy also does say is that the administration can set up a fee schedule which takes into consideration the purpose of the event. And I think that phrase is what is so important, taking in consideration the purpose of the event. And when you're dealing with organizations that are student-facing and beneficial, and after-school activities that we're discussing are very, very important to the growth, to the whole child. When you take that into consideration, that fee schedule is not a set schedule. I don't even think that we have to take a vote on a fee schedule right now to say that the policy is already gives you the authority to set a fee schedule for an organization that is trying to help our students. Personally, I don't even think that we need to make a change in that.
And I'll say this, because David just kind of walked
I know,
into a policy
we're
that he had
putting you in the
nothing to
firing
create.
squad, but.
But I do want to say that I think for us, we just wanted to hear this. We weren't prepared to respond or even provide that. Our notion is consistent application of this. No one, I think, in the room is against kids being involved on campus. What we are trying to do is we have this was on the book for some reason. These prices were set. I would like the opportunity to just research what's behind it, make sure we're cost neutral, and then provide with many opportunities. We do know that our notion was that if you were a partner through a previous partnership, or if there was no profit to be made by the organization, that was kind of the litmus. But we know that there's going to be a lot of use requests. We just want to be consistent. So that's what we're going to go back and look at these things. Low cost as possible, budget neutral, understanding what our responsibilities are as a district and our liabilities are with our insurance carrier, to make sure that we've looked at qualifications for student-based organizations, and then kind of collect how much we got last year. So I think it would be smart for us to not make any changes until we've heard from our insurance trust and our attorney for this policy, and then bring back some recommendations.
Anybody else? Thanks for taking the heat, Mr. Wiseman.
Oh, I'm good. Thank you. Have a good one.
Appreciate you. All right. That moves us to number 16 on the discussion agenda, which is the discussion of the April 18th, 2024 board workshop on the 5-year master facilities and rezoning plan for 2026-2027.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Since we've already did the workshop Thursday, I'm just going to do a recap for your consideration of the fix and fill rezoning plan. Our response of this was preparing for what we see as change in the future. We are one district operating 25 campuses, and as we look at the role, we asked those who attended the presentation that we did to our community. We had a virtual community town forum on April the 11th, and so you're going to see the results of those who participated in that forum. So we asked those in attendance, at this time in the presentation was 118 responses, which attended zone of the school district community they lived in. We talked about the challenges that we face in terms of the conditions of the facilities, the enrollment issues that we're seeing in the Chapin attendance areas, and then also the need to modernize our instructional workforce for our instructional programs for workforce development. And so this brought these 13 projects, we categorized them into 3 different subgroups: campus improvement projects, instructional and workforce development projects, and then rezoning related projects. In terms of the campus improvement projects, we talked about the security vestibules, and while we are currently in the process of putting security vestibules in some of our schools, the goal is to put that in some advanced security camera features in all of our schools. We talked about the NPS report that did a facilities condition assessment report rating 3.7 million total square feet of space, looking at everything from health and safety, building envelope, mechanical, electrical and plumbing, site conditions, and interiors. That report found 11,137 incidences with about a price tag at that time that they provided the report that we presented in the fall of this year, almost $180-something million of issues. What's important to note is that we average about 29 maintenance work orders per day. So it's important to understand that we're continuing to receive issues as a district that we're addressing. When you do a composite of these facility conditions, you see that the Dutch Fork schools and the Irmo schools are in dire need of repair. We've also looked at the need to enclose the walls at Harbison West and Nursery Road Elementary School. These schools, unlike any of our other 11 elementary schools, or any of our schools, have open wall concepts, which don't work very well in terms of the instructional environment. So the plan was to renovate those by enclosing the classroom walls. Also, the district office is in, which due to the conditions of the portables and part of the building that we can't use right now due to mold, was to have an administrative professional development building to replace that building on the baseball field of the current site. We talked about the multi-purpose pavilion and versus the indoor facility. And I want to share that in the beginning of this presentation, I talked about indoor climate control practice facilities. And hearing from our experts in the field, we have shifted. It's not the request for a fully enclosed indoor practice facility. The request is for a covered practice pavilion. I've asked Mr. Mac Harvey to come forth and just quickly share some of the slides that he shared, not all of the slides, but some of the slides that he shared at our workshop so that we can have it on record for a board meeting. So joining Mr. Harvey, we have our ADs that are here representing all of our high schools, but I would ask him to come forth to just share basically the request for the covered practice pavilion.
Good evening. So an indoor practice facility versus a multi-purpose pavilion. We are in the business of working with a lot of young people in the summer months and in the late summer months. It's very hot, as we know. And so what we want to talk with you just a minute about is providing shade for those young people when they're outside. So our two options are, we have a fully enclosed practice facility with air conditioning and able to control the temperatures versus a facility that's open to the outside, one that will be hot, but maybe not so hot. Heat acclimatization, very simply, is when you work with student athletes and help them get used to the environment. This is a process that takes at least 15 days to accomplish, and your goal here is to help young people when they're playing sports, when they're outside, to be able to handle the heat and not have any major heat-related issues. So once you acquire this acclimatization, you want to maintain that. Going inside and working out in an air-conditioned environment when it's too hot to be outside is really counterproductive to maintaining acclimatization. So our proposal here is that we move from an enclosed area to one that is open. We did do some gathering of some information. This is an example of what we do every day within our athletic department, and we monitor the heat. And we use something called the wet bulb globe temperature, which is a combination of atmospheric pressure, radiant pressure, or radiant temperatures that comes from the sun. This also takes into account the wind and then humidity. Well, this particular chart goes back to August 14th of last year, and you can see that from the hours of 10:30 all the way to 9:30, we had a number of readings. Every 30 minutes, we read the temperature, the wet bulb globe temperature, and you can see the readings that are in red and in black. Those are the readings or times where it's unsafe to go outside. The orange and the yellow, you have to monitor what you're doing outside with practice, and then yellow basically just tells you that you need to take more water breaks and just pay attention to what your athletes are doing. So the unshaded column tells us what the temperature, the wet bulb globe temperature was outside, and then the shaded area tells you what the temperature could be if you're blocking the sun and allowing your athletes and your young people to work in a shaded area. We all know it's just cooler in the shade. This was a study that we found. We wanted to do something more than just what we thought would happen and working with different formulas. But this was a study a gentleman by the name of John Shirley did where he was wanting to look at the effects of heat concerning shade and how that affected cattle. And he basically has determined the same thing that we are understanding as well, and that is that if you take the exact same time of day and you take a wet bulb globe temperature reading in the sunlight and then compare that to a wet bulb globe temperature reading in the shade, obviously the shade is going to be cooler. So what we're proposing and what we would like to ask you to all to think about and to move forward with is a pavilion-style shelter where this would be a facility large enough to do a lot of different things. We have the band in this picture practicing, as well as an open area where you can just use your imagination for all of the things that could occur in a facility this size. During the school day with our PE classes, our band classes, all kinds of things could go on during the school day, and then as well as in the afternoons, we would be able to continue and maintain our activities and worry less, much less, about the temperature and how those high temperatures affect our young people.
Thank you, Mr. Harvey, for that. And we also have with him A.D. Wessinger from Chapin and Athletic Director Calvert from Irmo High School. But before we move on, if there were any questions for our athletic directors, I would pause at this time.
Any questions? I think you answered most of our questions at our workshop, so thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. So we asked our attendees of these campus improvements what was their first choice, and you can see that security vestibules, followed by the two ranked facilities were the number 1 and 2 choices, followed by the enclosing of the classrooms at Harbison West and Nursery Road. We asked what was the second choice, and the second choice was the ranked number 2 facilities, followed by the security vestibules. You can see on 1 and 2, each of the projects received some votes. We talked about instructional workforce development projects to prepare our students to be college and career ready, and preparing our state to meet its need for what we see in our state as the workforce shortage gaps that we see in projected out to 2030. And so we discussed the digital solutions and artificial intelligence program at Dutch Fork High School, the Fine Arts Center at Chapin High School, and the Small Business Incubator at Irmo. During the workshop, we shared the location, the conceptual location of the Irmo High School Incubator, which is currently in its cafeteria. We are currently building a new wing, which is on the opposite end of the current cafeteria. So we would use that current cafeteria for the Small Business Incubator. Here's a conceptual of what that makerspace would look like on the inside. And then the current cafeteria would be the new student center on the end of the new building. We discussed the Construction Workforce Development Lab at the Center for Advanced Technical Studies to help with backflow issues that we're seeing and workforce issues that we're seeing in construction. And so we also talked about the location of the Fine Arts Center at Chapin High School and its conceptual drawings of how that would be placed in between the two buildings. We showed the front elevations of that conceptual as well as a conceptual of the interior. We asked those in attendance which instructional program for workforce development is most important to you. And you can see the Digital Solutions and Artificial Intelligence Lab at Dutch Fork High School received the most votes, followed by the Construction Workforce Development Lab. And then we went into the rezoning related projects. We talked about the expanding of Broad River Road and its impact on an elementary school located in that space. But the opportunity to bring back a historical site of the Rich Lex Education Center to house the Academy for Success, Adult Education, and the 5 virtual school. We talked about the new Dutch Fork Elementary conceptual and what it will provide the students of Dutch Fork Elementary School in terms of being able to meet their needs. From the first feedback meeting we had, or second feedback meeting we had at Ballantyne Elementary, one of the recommendations was adding on to the Lake Murray Elementary School as well as Chapin Elementary School. So with that, we estimated a 20,000 square foot addition to Lake Murray Elementary School, as well as a 16,000 square foot addition to Chapin Elementary School. So we asked which of the following rezoning related projects is most important to you. And the results were the elementary school wing at Chapin Elementary and Lake Murray Elementary, followed by Dutch Fork Elementary School. I think it's important to continue to articulate how we are planning to do the feel of our facilities. And I guess as a superintendent, I look at it more of an at-large issue versus localized to one area. As we've seen population shifts, and I'm going to talk about in terms of today's numbers. There was one point in our district where Irmo had the largest percent of students. There's another point where Dutch Fork had the largest percent of students, and that's where the buildings were built. And now it's in Chapin. Even if you look at the release of the 135th day report, the decline in students, where are they located? It would be very misleading to say that that decline in students is represented all over the district. That's incorrect. The reality is Irmo is stable, Dutch Fork is losing, and Chapin is gaining. Even if we are losing overall, we're seeing that trend that Chapin is growing in its schools, Dutch Fork is declining in population, and Irmo is stable. That's what the latest 135th day reports say. So the question that I asked from the beginning of the year, do we build a new building in school in Chapin, or do we fix and fill our existing schools? We have been on our staff working tirelessly to present a plan of the fix and fill at large, looking at our entire district without raising the tax rate. We had a meeting at Ballantyne Elementary School. It was on March 7th at 6 o'clock. At that meeting, the recommendation was, are you providing mental health support for students impacted by rezoning? And what I think is important is to understand that students move all the time. We deal with student transitions daily, whether it's the military or parents with jobs or changes or just shifts that happen. Some of the most transient populations that we have is at Seven Oaks, where 42 to 45% of that school changes yearly. So we have a lot of experience with students who are moved for matters that they have no control over. There was a recommendation from the community to grandfather families that have been impacted by rezoning. I hope to show through the data how blanket grandfathering means because my grandfather had that ability or that privilege, that I get it. But we said, and we posted this, we had the meeting, I believe it was a Wednesday. By Monday, this was posted and presented to the community, that we're a choice district and that we're drafting a preferred choice option for families most impacted by rezoning. And this could be offered to students through the highest grades of their current school. We had the recommendation to add existing buildings to prevent future rezoning. We've incorporated that within our plan. So with our plan, 99% of the students, and it's actually 99.7% of the students, keep their original high school zone. 1%, which is really 0.3, will be rezoned from Dutch Fork to Chapin High School. And there were no plans to remove our 3K, 4K programs. When we drafted the new map, you can see how the 13 elementary schools were charted out. This was using our existing facilities to handle our existing growth. This is, we showed this at a workshop on January the 8th, where we had the Office of Student Service and Planning with our accountability director, Dr. Van Holden, showing all of the data behind how we could move our students into the buildings, using not theoretical field, but the max field that outlines how programs are used. And that's what's important to understand, how programs are used at our schools. But since the January 8th meeting, as we received input, we added new construction to Chapin Elementary and Lake Murray Elementary for the master facilities plan. And that has increased the capacity at these two schools, which gives us new opportunities. And with that new opportunity, we can move less students. So we have now an option for, if the referendum passes, that would increase the capacity of Chapin Elementary, increase the capacity of Lake Murray Elementary, and have less impact on the current Ballantyne Elementary families. I want to point you to how these schools would look based on our current data of our K-5 enrollment. Without the referendum in our first map, Ballantyne is at 701, and I don't think it's ever been that big. I think maybe 680 is probably somewhere in there, 630. But we would have over 700 students there. We're not looking at projections, we're looking at actuals. You see the size of Chapin, Lake Murray, and Piney Woods. If, with the referendum, by enlarging Chapin and Lake Murray, we can get more students into those buildings, and it could reduce the population of Ballantyne. What this would do is allow for our preferred choice option to take effect. What is preferred choice? These are the families that were moved out of Ballantyne Elementary into either Dutch Fork Elementary, H.E. Corley Elementary, Oak Point Elementary, or River Springs Elementary. Right now, if you look at Ballantyne, about 89% of the current Ballantyne students are zoned through the Dutch Fork area. Without the referendum, that reduces down to about 30%, because 61% of, we need to move more students into Ballantyne from Lake Murray. About almost half, about 49% of the Lake Murray students are going to be moving into Ballantyne. It's a movement down from the west to the east. However, with the expanded Lake Murray, we can keep more students in the Lake Murray Elementary School. So this is just showing you, using the data as of April 15th, of what these schools would look like. Now, some of the potentials that we have, some of the advantages of with a bigger Lake Murray and Chapin Elementary is we impact less families. I don't know how to do a rezoning without impacting all families. We are trying our best to work in as many minimizing issues, whereas students keep their high school as possible. We have tried, as we've moved students, to keep neighborhoods together, and when that has come up, that to work and to keep as many neighborhoods together as possible, so that they move in with their neighborhoods. So in short, we have two maps. A map of how we move students in our existing buildings. Right now, in terms of no referendum, we are about at 95% max of our 8% funds. So I don't know where a new elementary school would come from, even if we did want to put it in Chapin. But with a referendum, The goal is to, at large, take care of the whole district. I do see a day, if you look at with the referendum map, in the Lake Murray attendance zone on the northern end, that you could put a future elementary school there. And the lines are drawn such a way that you could have a natural divide for that school. But in the 5-year plan is to address the facilities that we have throughout the entire district for the referendum. So with that being said, we hear a lot that, we should just make the move, but there's no planning in that about programs and teachers and certifications, and the growing number of requirements that we're responsible for doing. Our work in this fix and fill plan is to make sure that when we move students, we're not just moving them to a building, but that we're moving them to a place that is ready to receive them in their needs. So as we move from this program to this program, we are doing it using the same mill rate as if it fails. However, we do have a plan if we don't move forward with a referendum. So we ask the community to look at how this affects you. You have a QR code Dr. Harris and his team has placed up where we have put hundreds of thousands of parcels into our program here, where you can put in your address and see how this impacts you. And so we explained that here's our financial situation in terms of the tax rate millage that's required for each, limiting our borrowing over 20 years where we don't have to go over the 69.5 mills to pay this back. So we asked which of these options before the Board of Trustees do you prefer? And we had 158 total responses, and bond referendum with no tax rate increase received 94% of those responses. So we have received many questions that have come through. I think we've posted those on our website for your review. You can see those questions that were posed and the responses on our webpage. And then we asked how would people like to be updated, and that was through email. So we encourage to the community to continue to stay involved and aware of the things that we have, of the updates as we move through this presentation. One of the things that we wanted to point out that the board needs to consider is to complete the rezoning if there is a successful referendum by August 2026. We need the following projects to take place: a new Dutch Fork Elementary, the Rich Lakes Education Center, the wings at Chapin Elementary and Lake Murray Elementary. Looking at solicitation of A&E firms, getting construction documents, and actual construction time of the facility, that's 30 months, 2.5 years. We don't make August 2026 with 30 months. So looking at the timeline, the goal was if the board moves forward with this, that we move ahead with the A&E. It would be my request to the board to move forward with the A&E for those projects only, so that if the referendum succeeds, then we can move with full deliberate speed to make sure that this can happen in 2026. If it fails, then we have our projects and construction documents that we can use for future use. My calculations have February 2025 as being that point where we need to be able to start these projects in order to have a chance of implementing this in 2026 of the fall. So today is about discussing the fixing and filling projects. We have talked about having it again on the agenda on May 6th, and asking the board to make a decision on May 20th. Again, these are the estimates of the costs that we have for each of the projects, and we had at the discussion concluded with a discussion of the potential question. So with that, we'll pause for any questions.
Any questions? Ms. Huddle?
I have several, but I'll just ask a couple now in case other people do. The construction, I can't remember exactly what it's called, but where would that be located? And would it be on existing land, or would we need to buy land for that?
We would need to buy land for that.
Okay. The other question I had is, you said it quickly, so I want to make sure I understand. When you talk about A&E, you're talking about basically paying an architect, an engineer, I'm assuming that's the A and the E, to design the new Dutch Fork Elementary, those things right there, those top four. Okay, and so you want to go ahead and pay for that before the bond referendum. Okay, so two questions there. One, I guess, is where would the money come from to pay for that? And then the second question is, when would we vote on that?
Very good. So one of the things that we discussed at the workshop was if this was to pass on May 20th, what we would do is we've set up about $3.5 million aside for the fix and fill plan. Of that, I think we've exercised about 600,000 of that in the purchase of land for Irmo High School. So those funds would come from the funds that we've set aside for the fix and fill plan. That was a fund balance assignment.
So how much, all the 3.5 million?
I don't think it would cost all the three.
Okay, and you say fund balance, so you're talking about operating fund balance or capital?
This was operating, but.
That would have been general fund balance assignment.
Okay, so is this money that is sitting in the general fund right now? We haven't reallocated it yet?
We already assigned
It's
it,
sitting
though.
in the fund balance for the general fund that was,
Okay.
I think the assignment was done last year.
The assignment was done last year.
Okay.
Yep.
And I have some other questions, but I'll pause.
Anyone else have any questions? Go ahead, Ms. Barnhart.
Just a quick one. Could you go back to the slide with the cafeteria on it? No, maybe while you're scrolling, if you keep going.
The
to the
Irmo cafeteria?
Yeah, the Irmo one,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm a.
And I guess it's just a really kind of random question, but I don't remember when I know we had talked about the one before that, I think it was. Yeah, the business incubator, but first, maybe I must have missed it, or I might have missed it, and I could be mistaken. But when was that added to the proposal for the new cafeteria on the East Wing?
So this was the conceptual was to always add a small business incubator in the current cafeteria. That's what displaced this. So in the estimates of this project, all of this was included within the estimate.
Gotcha, okay.
So it's not an additional cost or anything.
Right.
When we said small business incubator, it's the total project. So it's the incubator, and we were calling it a student center. But that estimate that we have includes this total project.
So that will be included in the construction of the East Wing?
Correct. Now, it would be a separate,
separate
bid, a separate project. But the way the new East Wing is designed is designed with the ability to attach onto it. One of the concerns that the administration has is with the new East Wing, let's say this project doesn't exist. You can see every day you have to move the students from this end all the way across the campus to the cafeteria. Mm-hmm. That becomes a challenge each and every day. It can be done, but the goal was kind of replacing that cafeteria with a new one, and then having the incubator as the elective space on the end.
And it said on that timeline, the East Wing is looking at completion around February, March of '26. Would this part be after that, or would it be?
So yes, it would be after, and then of course it would have to be bid separately. So part of that bid would be working either with that GC or that GC might bid on it. And so that's when that phasing would come in. I think typically we have, what is it, Martin? I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but like 6 years, 5-6 years to exercise the funds for these?
For the referendum?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
So that's kind of the phasing timeline of that. But that's why the student center was replaced. But in our estimate, we have both projects there.
A lot of construction on that road for a little while. Huh?
Yes,
But
yes,
it'd
ma'am.
probably be worth it. And then my second question is, how much is it gonna cost in annual maintenance, or like the cost increase of the maintenance for kind of all of these projects as a whole going forward?
That's a good question. I can look at what our existing footprint is, and I'm not trying to put maintenance on the spot here, but we've looked at some max min per square foot industry estimates of cost. I think the min was $6.54 a square foot. And if that's the minimum point of maintaining your facilities at 3.8 million square feet, that's about $24 million a year. As you know, we currently don't spend $24 million on our existing plant. So I think that's why we're in the kind of deferred maintenance plan that we are, is that as we expand our footprint, but do not expand the maintenance budget to maintain it, we kind of get into this run-to-fail system. So our goal is in what I would hope, or I would say hope, but one of the options that we would have with a referendum is that we could spend referendum debt and not 8% debt. We could use that time to pay down the 8% capacity, get it into a much more manageable space so that we could use more of our 8% to take care of the square foot plant. But that was just a minimum number of $6.54 a square foot. So that's in terms of maintenance numbers.
Mr. Satterfield?
Just a quick question. Apparently, we're not doing a very good job of selling the issues that we have with our district office because it was the lowest thing on the totem pole. I guess they don't know about the mold and mildew on half of the building. The practice field, I think when we first started talking about it and looked at the price that was the estimation for the build, it wasn't a full size field at that time. We were talking about a partial size. Knowing that we're now talking, I'm assuming, by a full size, 2 end zone, completely covered field. And if it's going to be used by multiple groups, will we have to fall into ADA compliance and all that goes with facilities being accessible to all students? I was just curious, the price, and I've never built one, obviously, I don't have one in my backyard, but the price, it seems like for that price to build 3, it seems like it ought to, to me, it just seems like it ought to be higher. Have we looked at that really? Are you all confident in that price?
And so, what we're looking at is estimates of facilities that have been built in other places. Of course, you don't know until you get down to the actual bid of what it would be. One of the things we talked at the workshop is our priority of projects, right? You know, if we get down to it and this is cost prohibitive, then it's not prioritized as one of the top projects. We looked at, and I'm looking at my team here. If I'm wrong, you can come and correct me here. But it was full fields that were turfed. Is that correct? So one of the things that we're responsible for all of our facilities, as you say, accessibility, whether it's ADA or even Title IX accessibility for anything that serves the athletic squads. And just as you know, whether students get hurt, and so whether it's wheelchairs or crutches or scooters, making sure we have access to all of our facilities.
Any other questions, Ms. Settle?
On the Lake Murray Elementary wing and the Chapin Elementary, for each of those, how many students would that add? What capacity would that add?
So we can do the subtraction together,
But that's enrollment, right? Because I did the subtraction, and it really, like, not much on Lake Murray. So is it really just going to add 82?
Right, and so remember what we're doing, though, is we're removing portables here. So when we take the portables out, you're talking about 82 over all of the, I forget how many portables are on the campus there, but all of those portables are now off the campus. So it is not just 82, it's whatever the number of students that are outside the building plus that additional. Same thing with Chapin Elementary. All of those portables would now be gone, plus you would have additional capacity there.
Well,
I think this would not be, this is probably not the best thing to look at. I think the best thing to look at would be today's current numbers plus the addition. So let me make sure I get the exact number.
Yeah,
to
or
that
just
response.
tell us for this addition, how many students that addition could hold. Is that, can we look, instead of getting enrollment in the way, just look at capacity? I guess that's what I'm trying to figure out, is how much would each of those additions increase capacity?
And what I want to, I guess, let me make sure I get that right answer. I know the square foot, but in terms of the number of students we're putting in, our work was to make sure that we had all of our classrooms in, that were in the portables, and that we could receive additional, but we'll make sure we get that number.
Okay, I mean, we don't have to have it today. I just kind of wanted to understand it. The other thing is, can you go back to the slide that has the question, like, it had, like, would you want to do the bond referendum, the one that had the big green? That one. I mean, in the interest of true transparency, shouldn't one of the options be no bond referendum and your tax rate decreases? Because that's what would happen.
Let me ask you, is that true?
Absolutely true. Before Piney Woods Elementary was built, the millage rate was, I think, 54 mills. And when they built Piney Woods, they used 8% money and they spread it only over 3 years. So the rate would have actually gone down if we hadn't kept it at 69.5. If the debt continues to be paid off, the millage rate will go down.
Can I ask a question clarifying that?
Sure.
How could you promise that? If you have a report that shows a lot of critical needs, you can tell the community that we're not going to take care of those needs, and we can guarantee you we'll reduce the millage rate there.
I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't take care of needs, but it's finance. I mean, what we're talking about is if you borrow $240 million, there's a cost. It's not free, there's a cost. And it's paid for in the millage rate staying like it is for a very long time. If you don't do that, or you do less than $240 million, you don't borrow that money, therefore the millage rate will go down. And I guess it's just disturbing to me as a person with a finance background to pose the question like this to people. People need to know, because back when I watched the board meetings on Piney Woods, and there was a lot of discussion about how the millage rate would go down when these bonds were paid off. So I'm not saying, I mean, just be frank with people.
But
We
I
have
want to
these
be
needs.
clear. We're accused of misleading, and it gets very tiring to hear that.
It
You
is
be-
misleading.
It is.
It's
to say
absolutely
to-
misleading.
But I didn't cut you off, so if I can have that respect. To say to people that the debt service would decrease, how could we promise that the debt service would decrease? To say that would to say that a board in the future would never raise the debt service. We just told you that right now our debt capacity is at 96%, 95%. So that means that the boards of the future would say, we are not doing anything. We're not going to do aggressive repay. We're not going to raise to execute more borrowing to take care of problems. That all of those options are off the table for a future board. The only thing we can promise is if we act or if we don't act, with this borrowing capacity, this is the impact on voters. But to say that a future board would never take care of those issues, I don't know if we can promise that. And that's all I'm saying, is that to say that you could decrease would be to ignore the facility issues that we have in the district. As an at-large superintendent, I don't see how we could promise that to our community and to the students and the teachers who work in these facilities.
Okay, Dr. Ross, by that logic, you can't say this is no tax increase either, because this does not solve the problem at Chapin High School, and it's getting worse. And so by that logic, you can't say this is no tax increase either, because we could pass this and then we could say we're out of room at Chapin High School, we're going to have to we're going to have to borrow more money. So it works both ways. If we do this, there's no tax increase immediately, but there probably will be to fix Chapin High School's enrollment. The converse is true too. If this bond referendum doesn't pass, the next year the tax rate will go down. Will it stay down? No, but it also might not stay flat either. I'm just saying we don't need to let people think money is free, because it's not. When you pass a bond referendum or this board borrows money, there's a tax impact to people. It's never free.
I would, and I'm not going to argue. I'm just sharing with our financial advisor share with us. It may be helpful that we question a financial advisor, but all we're sharing is what are the implications to the debt service millage rate of these decisions. The ifs are not in either one of these scenarios of what can happen in the future. It is the implication of a $240 million debt service borrow. I'm sorry.
Mr. Hoyen and then Mr. Satterfield.
Dr. Ross, you had mentioned that with the additions to Lake Murray Elementary, that would eliminate portables, correct?
That's correct, yes, sir.
Would it eliminate portables at Chapin Elementary as well?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay, are there any other elementary schools that we have in our district that are currently utilizing portables?
No, sir.
Okay, and I say that from the sense that, I mean, I've had kids in Lake Murray Elementary, and I've got one there now, and one of them had the opportunity to be in a portable. Looking at the aerial, unless Google Maps is out of date, I think I counted 16 portables at Lake Murray Elementary. And at, just say 20 students per portable. I think the max is 23 per class, correct?
25.
25 per class, but just at 20, that's 320 students in a portable. And I say that from the sense that My child was, he's a runner. Not in the sense that he runs away from school, right? Not in the sense that he runs away, but in the event of a certain situation, he's a designated runner because he's in a portable and it wasn't a position that he had safety and security, right? And so I understand anything that we can possibly do to eliminate the portables, vulnerable areas in our school, I'm behind. So I understand, the philosophy behind it. I would encourage us to look at any opportunity to put all of our students inside a brick and mortar.
Yeah, I wanted to clarify a couple of things too, at least from my perspective, and that is that I don't feel like this is misleading at all. I think that we have been given a presentation from one end to the other, every scenario that is possible, what would happen. I really believe that, there may be, we've had some discussions about Chapin High School. In the future, there may be a situation because of the situation with Spring Hill that there is another referendum. You can't just say that there will never be another, this is going to solve all problems. But I think that putting in there that no bond referendum and this could lower your taxes would be misleading in of itself as well. I think that a lot of folks would see that as, oh, I'll lower my taxes, that's why I'm going to vote for this. That's what I'm going to vote for. I'm going to say no because I want to lower my taxes, because that's how a lot of folks see this. I mean, they don't take the time. I looked at the video from our last workshop. There were 27 people that watched the video. 27. The rest of the folks get their information word of mouth. I don't know how many people are watching this meeting tonight, but I suspect there's not 100 people watching it. So when they look at that referendum, if they look at a question, if it says, if you vote no, we could lower your taxes, well, you're also going to have schools, like Mr. Hogan said, filled with portables, which aren't safe for kids. We've got a lot of schools, and those of us who have been out visiting the schools, we know the condition of these schools. They have been let go for a very long time. We are in desperate need of this, in my opinion, of this referendum. So I disagree to say that it's misleading. I think it would be more misleading to imply that it's bad because it's going to, and that's how some folks will see it. It's going to increase your taxes. Because you were just saying nothing is free. Of course nothing is free. But to say that no referendum means that your taxes will probably get lower, well, for a lot of folks, that's all they'll know, that's all they'll see, and that's what they'll vote on. So that's just my 2 cents.
Mr. Scully?
I have a background in finance. I work in finance every day. What you said is misleading. All this is saying is that relating to the funds in the bond does not require a tax increase or a millage increase to secure those funds. It does not mean that there is not going to be a tax increase in the future or a tax decrease or anything relating to that. This is talking specifically about these funds. Cheese and rice. This is, you're obfuscating the issue. This is clear.
All right, Mr. Scully.
You need to stop, okay?
All right, we're not getting into back and forth right now. Please.
No, I agree,
I mean, please, okay, please.
Okay, I'm not making derogatory comments about anybody else
I don't care who's making
on here.
derogatory comments. We're not getting into that right now. It is 10 o'clock. We're going to respect each other, guys, all right? Does anybody else have any other comments? All right. Dr. Ross, is that what you have for 16? All right, thank you very much. All right, so that's going to bring us into item 17, which is the fiscal year 2025 general fund budget calendar and Exhibit I.
Yes, as our interim Chief Financial Officer, Marty Rolls, comes to the podium, we just wanted to outline our budget calendar for fiscal year 2025. Marty Rolls.
Thank you. As you can see from the calendar here, tomorrow starts the budget debate on the Senate floor. The the budget bill out of the Senate Finance has already come through. One thing I want to make sure that everybody understands is the $47,000 starting salary for a bachelor's degree teacher with 0 years of experience is the same in both houses. So unless the Senate makes any amendments on the Senate floor, that will carry through. That will not be debatable because it does match both houses. The first reading, we're planning for May 6th, second reading on May 20th, with the final reading on June the 10th, and that will be the date of the public hearing. Couple of things that I want to bring up that are in the House version and are also the similar in the Senate version is there is a proposed increase of 11.8% in employer contributions for health insurance. And over the last 3 years, that'll be a 33.6% increase when you look back 2 fiscal years and add the 11.8. So that's a substantial cost to the district. I also wanted to remind everyone that obviously the ESSER funding ends September 30th. And over the 3, ESSER 1, 2, and 3, we have been able to profit or been able to put money in the system of $23 million plus. It's made a huge impact in the district. It's made opportunities for social emotional learning, for learning, us to be able to provide instructional programs for learning. So it's made a big difference. And how we respond to that after September 2024 is going to also make a difference. What do we need to continue that we have been doing that we've seen successes with? And how will we fund those items going forward? So those are some of the things that we are looking at as we go through this budget season. Obviously, we're all very familiar with inflation. It's happening in every facet of our society, not exempting instructional programs, supplies, services, and we all know how utilities are increasing. So these are some of the things that we're looking at as we look at the budget for the 24-25 school year. The funding formula for the education is based on a 75-25 ratio. So once they go through the entire formula, right now the number of students per teacher is, and remember their teacher is not what we call a classroom teacher. It includes guidance counselors. It includes a lot of other people in the mix, is 11.23 students per teacher in the Senate version, 11.2 in the House version. So a little bit of change there, but when everything shakes out, and you can see it if you look at our monthly financial statements, our local to state, instead of being 75-25, we're looking at about a 64-36 ratio. So based on what the ability of our district to pay for taxes kind of changes the amounts that we realize of state funding. All this is based on the index of tax-paying ability, which is an amount that is provided to us by the Department of Revenue. It is our total assessed value as a percentage of the entire state's total assessed value. Like I said, that number is provided to us annually. Last year, I went back through Ms. Paul's presentations from last year. Last year, District 5 was the 15th largest on the index. This year, we're the 14th largest out of 80 districts in the state. So we are number 14 out of 80. Want to also remind you that just because our weighted pupil units for enrollment is going down does not necessarily mean our funding will go down. It doesn't mean that our funding will go up if it goes up. It just is all relative based on what our percentage of the whole is. It's a pretty involved formula when you look at all of the data points that they are including in this. I wanted to make sure you had the information on our 135th day. We had 16,750.61 individuals, students in K-12. This does not include anything pre-K. This is only K-12, which is what our funding is based on. That's compared to the same time last year of 16,956.32. When you calculate the weighted pupil units, the way they do it, a traditional student in grades K through 12 would be a 1. However, if you have special needs, it's a 2.6 weighting. There are also additional weightings for gifted and talented. Our I say it wrong every time. Our non-English speaking students, as their primary language, you get an additional weighted average. You can get additional funding for pupils in poverty and academic assistance. So when all that settles out, our 135th day weighted pupil units will be 26,574.42 as compared to 26,811.07. So just a small difference from last year. Still waiting to find out what the state's weighted pupil units are on the 135th day. The problem with calculating that is that with charter, I don't know the mix between what's brick and mortar and what is a virtual charter, and that adds into the whole state's weighted pupil units, usually about 1.2, 1.3 million overall. So as soon as we get these numbers, we did get some numbers today for the Senate, and they were just a small bit different than the House as far as the allocation. So I think we're looking good. I'm pleased with where the revenues are coming in at. I think we will, we'll have to tweak some things, but there again, with the 47,000 being the same in both houses, about a 6% increase overall for the whole certified teacher salary schedule. The bachelor's column is realizing a much larger increase than the doctorate column, and that's just based on the way the state has assigned the increases, the numbers that they calculated and came up with. And Dr. Ross, I think you wanted to speak about the charts at the bottom.
Yes, very briefly, I just want to share that this is something that we have to consider as a district and board as we do this budget. Last year, the base state salary was $42,500. The base Lexington and Richland 5 was $44,000. So we were over the state budget. Now the state is bringing it up to $47,000 for base. It appears in the media that we're getting $47,000 for every teacher, and we're not. As you heard, we get 68 cents.
About 64 cents
64 cents on the dollar. So we have to come up with that difference. And plus, we do a 25-to-1 ratio. The state allows you to go up to 35-to-1. So we have more teachers in our district because we have smaller class sizes. So more teachers, more allotment that we have to come. I just want to make sure everyone understands, it takes a lot of local to get to 47 for all of our teachers at 25-to-1. So I don't want everyone to think that there is a pass-through of funds at 100% dollar for dollar for this. This is going to take a lot of local to do. We are able to do it, but to be 2,000, 1,500 above this 47, I don't know how we can pull that off. So I just wanted to make that clear. I don't want to belabor the point tonight, but as we go through this, you're going to talk to D5 teachers. That we are paying a lot. I tell Dr. Turner all the time, if we were at 35-to-1, we wouldn't have a teacher shortage. But we invest in the smaller class sizes. We're going to continue to invest in those smaller class sizes. It's just going to be, we have to come up with that other 30-something cents on that dollar.
Any questions?
Any questions? Ms. Huddle?
Did the weighted pupil units for Kate stay, I think it was at 1.3? Was it
1.2.
1.2?
Yes.
What classifies a student as Kate? Is it one class? Is it a course or a enrollment in a certain program?
As I understand it, it's one class. Is that correct?
It's my understanding that it's that one double block class, because it is double blocked.
And then Perkins is the completers, correct?
That's correct.
All right, so one class, a student counts as, so one of our goals should be to fill all our K classes,
We
right?
read you loud and clear on that.
Okay,
Yes,
just
ma'am.
making sure, okay.
Dr. Ross, when we are looking at this chart for 24, 25, do you have a ballpark of what you're going to recommend for the base salary in Lexridge 5? Or are we going to stay with the 47? Or are we going to go up because we've
Is
historically
anybody
paid
watching?
above?
I'll tell we're waiting to see what our neighbors put in.
Right.
And then,
Isn't the goal to raise the starting, the governor's goal, I think, is to
50.
raise the starting state, or the base salary to like 50,000 or 50 something?
50,000 by 2026.
So like every year, it's going up. So every year, we're going to be going up in salary, and to stay competitive, we're going to need to be a little bit above what that base rate is. And then that moves it, that kicks it up all the way up the
what's happening?
steps, right?
That's the bigger issue, right? It's going to kick it up all the way up to the steps. What you would try to do is create you want some slope in your payment schedule, so there's incentive to stay a longer amount of time. If the slope decreases, then you get flattened out. So by raising to 50 without the funding to bring it up through the rest of the scale, so you can realize a 6% increase on the front end, and at the end of the scale, we're at one,
It's like at 1%. I mean, you can see the numbers here from 42.5 to 47. You're looking at an approximately right at 10% increase right there. So if you see a 10% in the first, right there in that first square, and when you get to a doctorate with 28, because they've added the extra 5 years to the schedule as well, it's like a 1%. The entire doctorate column, based on their minimum salary schedule, is 1 to 2% increases, whereas the bachelor's is much higher. And they're front loading it to get the newer teachers into the education field.
Mr. Satterfield?
Yeah, and I was going to say, and if you couple that with the cost of getting that master's degree, and you're only getting 2%, 1.5%, in order to recoup that cost to increase your pay, it could take several years, and that's a real issue that should be addressed. I'm just curious, Dr. Ross, what are we telling teachers, new teachers right now, when they're coming on board?
So we want to thank y'all for giving them $500 for the signing bonus now. We do have the NARI program where we give our new teachers in our first 3 years $2,500. So on top of this, whatever we do, if we go to 47, we're almost at 50,000 in that package. But I would also say, too, one of the things that we have to share is our benefits package. Now, that's going up in healthcare about 11.8% this year.
Correct.
So those are funds that don't realize in your paycheck, but they do realize in your benefits. We are the primary carrier of a lot of families. We carry a lot of non-employees. We pay their health benefits, and I think to some, I think we're at like $15,000 an employee covering the family's health care. So all of that has to be paid. We hit that big time on the local side. So as we go up in the payroll salary, it's just, it's going to be a huge drain, not drain, but, it's going to be a huge demand. So I just wanted to share that as we make this move to 50,000, there's not money dollar for dollar for that. And we have to look locally for that. So we're dedicated to the class sizes. I was being facetious, but I'm being serious. We want to be competitive too. So, asking around, where are you going? And so we're trying to work that in with our operational things. I think right now, like 88 cents of every dollar we have is for people.
We're about 88 to 89 cents of every dollar, yes.
So looking at how that other 12, 11 cents is going to require with no ESSER. So that's what we're going to bring back to you on the 6th. working to put a proposal in there. But I just can promise you, we can't be $1,200 or $2,000 above the minimum this year.
Any other questions on this? All right, thank you, Ms. Rawls. I think you might need to stay there. This brings us to number 18 on our discussion agenda, the budget transfer for instructional supports, Exhibit J. Dr. Ross?
Ms. Rawls?
So I put out a survey to the principals talking about the 24-25 school year, and I asked them what their priorities were with their funding that has nothing to do with people, nothing to do with capital. What are your priorities? And it was very telling that for the elementary and the middle, intermediate and middle schools, they all shared a common need. And so what I would like to do, and I'm asking you all for the permission to do, or the approval to do a budget transfer, is our grades K through 2 talked about decodable texts. So the first thing I did, of course, was go to Google and find out what a decodable text was, and it really reinforces those sight words. These kids are the ones that are going to be in this new Read to Succeed. We will have to do reading recovery camp in the summer for these students in K-12 going forward. I think that anything that we can invest into that to get them more familiar with their sight words, more of that love for reading, that was, for me, that's a no-brainer. This was a district-wide. This was not one elementary school. I'm telling you, I got it 13 times. Every one of them was interested in that. Grade 3 through 5, classroom libraries as far as class sets of books, so that they all can read the same book and share together and have book studies, and there again, continue to grow that love of reading. 5th through 8th grade was pretty consistent. They were looking at what could they do to reward positive behavior, to have behavior interventions, to support students. I will tell you, I'm not above bribing to get what I need and get the results. And if that's what it takes for these children, I think it's something that we can certainly, we have the capability to invest in. So I went and looked at, played around with some numbers, trying to figure out what we could do with the 13 elementary schools, K through 2, $10 per student for the decodable text. For the classroom libraries, 3rd through 4th and 5th grade, $8 per student, and then for the student behavior interventions, $5 per student. These were all based on the most recent enrollment numbers that I had. So you're looking at an $81,000 budget transfer, and it would be coming from unencumbered support benefits. It's money that, based on the payroll and the personnel that we have hired today, these dollars will go unspent. And I think this would be a great area that we can use and see results quickly with these dollars. We've talked to the principals and told them they will have a short turnaround period because it has to be ordered and received before June 30th. So if this is something that you all would support, we can certainly make this happen for each school.
I think this is a great idea. Anyone have any questions? Thank you for taking the initiative to do a survey and find all of this information out. I think it's great. Thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Hogan?
I've got a motion for 19.
Go ahead.
That we can adjourn.
I have a second.
I second.
Ms. Barnhart, seconds. Any discussion? All in favor? Motion carries 6-0. We will adjourn until May 6th.